after the 45-minute Q&A for you guys to ask any questions that you want. So yeah, and could I just get a show of hands? How many people are not from MIT or not in the community here? Oh wow, okay. So it's pretty even split. So yeah, I think another not unintended, but another benefit of this event is for you guys to do some networking. I have some networking questions here, but I think it's important for you guys to get to know one another and exchange contact information. I think we have a very good representation of people in medicine, people in pharma, students, grad students, med students, what have you. So after the event, feel free guys to stay around, drink more boba. I think we might have over-ordered, so take more for the road home. And yeah, just feel free to network. I think there's a lot of benefit to this. All right, so let's get started. So first, I just want to give some background on Dr. Syed. So she is a global clinical lead at Sanofi US. Meanwhile, she's also a teleneurologist at NeuroX. And finally, she's the president of American Muslim Health Professionals. And we'll unpack more of those as we get into the Q&A. But yeah, Dr. Syed, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I guess the first question that I wanted to go over, just to kind of set the scene for the audience, is could you just give everyone a brief overview of your academic and professional journey up to this point? Like I said, mashallah, you have a lot of accomplishments. I could just fill up a page just with all the things that you've done. So if you could just kind of give us a walkthrough, verbally of all the milestones in your career, and perhaps, yeah, just set the scene for us who we're talking to tonight.
Definitely, thank you. So I think living in Boston, I think this crowd, mashallah, is also probably very accomplished. You know how it is that there is an emphasis to learn and learn more, and then when you've reached a certain point, learn just a little bit more. So that is usually the journey that most of us have when we come to Boston, and that's usually the intention we have when we come to Boston. So after I did med school, I did that in Pakistan actually, because I grew up in Kuwait, and then I came to the U.S. after I finished med school. And I came for residency and all that usual track. So I did a neurology residency at Boston Medical Center, and then I did 2 fellowships at Beth Israel. At the same time, I also did a master's in public health at the Harvard School of Public Health, since I was in that neighborhood. Doing all of that, I seemed rather confused to a lot of people because I was doing a lot of different things and it didn't seem to tie together. But for me, it always made sense because I had interests in discovery, I had interest in clinical medicine, I had interest in, quite simply put, curing something, which was really my incentive when I actually went to med school to begin with. So in essence, after I finished my fellowships and my master's, I was already kind of drained from the clinical work. Burnout has been thrown around a lot for the physician crowd here, especially since COVID. But I have to admit that even after my fellowship, I couldn't see myself doing that day in, day out. And I realized that academic research was not really for me. I'm not built for a lab environment. So it was a process of ruling out is what I'm getting at, right? And the pace of research for me needed to be quicker. So I had done a lot of clinical trials as part of my demyelinating disorder fellowship, and I decided to look into pharma. Now, since this is Boston, I was able to land a position at Tufts Medical Center actually, and they had a collaboration with Pfizer. And that was my first foray into the pharmaceutical space because I was faculty at Tufts, but since I was considered junior faculty, I was spending most of my time in this research program called a Clinical Translational Research Fellowship at Pfizer, where I got to spend 4 days out of the week there. And I was actually doing projects at Pfizer, actually seeing what it means to be in the pharmaceutical space. Because quite frankly, we don't know what it entails when you're looking at it from the outside. You could say it's kind of glamorous, but do you really want to do this? Because in essence, what pharma is, for those of you, and I know a few people here who are in pharma, it's like a bunch of meetings and then a bunch of other meetings to discuss what you did in the meetings, and then you do more meetings to debrief on it. So that's usually what it is, and in between you're reading stuff. So that's the day-to-day really. But for me, it was still interesting because the in-between and the thinking and the strategy is what spoke to me, right? And I do still have one foot in the clinical space. I will admit that it's been on and off. There were like a few months and up to a year that I didn't actually do clinical work in between, especially during COVID, but then I started again. So it's been very part-time. But that was how I got started, and I will say that it was tough to get in initially because after I finished my fellowship, they were giving me really junior positions that I didn't want. So, but then once I got this clinical translational research fellowship, Pfizer offered me an associate director job within 6 months. I was the same person, I was just in a different space, and they saw me like, straight up, right? I was right there. I turned them down this time because I decided that I should complete the program and most likely I would get an even better position, and I was right. So you should never sell yourself short is my point. So in any case, after I finished the program, I went into another company called EMD Serrano, and from there I stayed there a year and a half or so, and then in the last 5 years I'm at Sanofi. Maybe we should now go to the next question.
Thank you so much. As a follow-up, you mentioned that throughout your kind of medical education and into residency and fellowships and all that stuff, you mentioned that you were maybe you appeared lost to people from the outside, whereas in reality your interests were just kind of widespread and you were trying to do as many things as you could. I feel like that might be true for some pre-meds here in the audience, or medical students or people that are still in academia, and I just kind of wanted to ask, what advice would you give to these students, especially at a place like MIT? It's one of the top colleges, and honestly, like, these students might have the same aspirations as you. Oh, I want to do this, I want to do research, I want to do 20 fellowships and whatever. When in reality, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So what are some habits and what advice would you give in general to these students to avoid that burnout long term?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what is fundamentally that drove me to this point and kept me going is that what I said briefly, like when I decided to go into medicine, I'm South Asian, so I think my parents decided for me, but I rolled with it. But the point is that when I decided that I agreed with them, let's put it that way, is that I did have that starting point of, I think I would like to cure something. So break it down into like what it is that is driving you to do these disparate things. So make that connection for yourself. Nobody else really matters, quite frankly speaking. So make that connection for yourself because you don't want to fall into a different trap where you're doing 5 different things because you want to build your resume or because your friend is doing it or because that's what's competitive. So it's a fine balance. There are many things that I may not have done that other people do. I never worked in a lab for once, I already said that. So, and that didn't speak to me. And it might have looked great on my resume in some ways, but I just didn't have the mindset for it. So I decided not to. So and also rule things out. And I would say one more thing is, feel free to change your mind, especially early on. And I think Tarek said a very important thing. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So these shortcuts that people start looking for, I don't necessarily agree with that. You do have to put in some work. I'm not saying like, I should have done the 3rd fellowship or something, not that kind of work, but you do have to put in some work to be able to make yourself worthwhile for that aspiration. Because, and I do believe that you should always believe that you're good enough. I'm not saying that. A little bit of delusion actually helps build up your confidence. But I do think that it is important to put the work in. it's important to know your why. Whether you're able to explain it to somebody else or not, that's different and it doesn't really matter. I mean, once you're actually going for your dream job or whatnot, the point is that during those interviews, during those conversations, you have to put it together for that person, not for everybody else that's questioning you. So I think those are kind of the key points that you have to keep in mind. Of course, there may be more and there may be different experiences and paths than my own, but that's what worked for me.
And speaking of different paths, I wanted to ask, so as I was doing my research, again, I'm not a specialist in this field, but basically the internet was saying fellowships are like a way to get even more specialization inside like a subgenre of a subgenre. So I guess for like people in the audience that might be physicians or medical professionals that want to, you know, follow your path in eventually transitioning into pharma, would you say that doing a lot of fellowships in a bunch of different specializations is a good thing? It'll make you more competitive to people that are trying to hire you for pharma, or would you say that that's not necessarily true and that you shouldn't waste your time doing all these fellowships in these niche subgenres?
That's a great question. For me, now that I'm hiring different medical directors and scientists, I will be honest, I look for fellowship training. I don't look for 2 to 5. I look for fellowship, any fellowship training. I look for research within that, not just fellowship training, but also in your academic career. Because it's a little atypical the way that I switched over kind of immediately after fellowship. Usually people switch over 5 to 10 years after they've been in academia, and those are the people I've hired, so that's why I say that. So, but I do look for some subspecialty training. I have not typically hired anyone without that. However, I will caveat that by saying there are different departments within pharma, right? So I work in the research and development, what is called clinical development, neurology specifically is the department I'm in. But for instance, in safety, which is pharmacovigilance, they don't require much subspecialty training. They require a detail-oriented mindset. They require potentially you have done some work in a clinical trial, or you have contracted with some company, because we contract with physicians in the field sometimes to do safety reviews, like if you've done some kind of review work like that. So, but for R&D specifically, we do seek out specialized personnel, unless you were in the field like a few years ago when it wasn't so stringent. Then of course, like you have pharma experience, then that will offset that need. So that's kind of the balance. But now there's a huge efflux of physicians into pharma, so the space is getting more and more competitive as a result of that.
So yeah, speaking of the pharma industry, perhaps for physicians or medical professionals that aren't interested right now in pharma, but perhaps this talk might pique their interest, I wanted to talk about your like quote unquote day in the life as the global clinical lead at Sanofi. I guess you mentioned that it's a bunch of meetings, and no one really knows why there's a meeting when it maybe could have been an email. But I guess moving forward from that, there's a global like word appended to your title. So I guess, what does someone that's a global clinical lead do, and how is that different from anything else?
Sure. So yeah, that was a little bit facetious what I said, but it was true to some extent. We may need some MIT students to like analyze the problem for us one day. But yes, there is a lot of meetings, and I have the global title because for sometimes you can be more of a regional director. That is a little bit more common in medical affairs, where they have folks that are committed to just the North America region, people that are committed maybe just like Australia as a region, or like continental, and then they also have global medical directors. Now the difference lies, in R&D it's a little complicated. We don't have regional medical directors that much. The only place where Sanofi is the only example I have in front of me in this aspect is that we have some R&D folks just based in China. They're China medical directors. What happens is that they don't really run their own studies. So they become our support staff. Like they would, since there's a language barrier, they'll kind of do the translational piece for us and become experts that way. Or they will translate our documents once we're done with the trials and we want to file for approval. So they become more ancillary. That's what happens in the clinical development space. In medical affairs, it's more like they're dealing with all the projects that are North America based. And they are dealing with all the physicians that are North America based because it's a more outward facing role. Myself, now I'll describe what I do as a global person. So what happens is that I'll tell you what I do. So I design and run phase 3 trials. In MS specifically right now, I've done 1 or 2 other disease areas, myasthenia gravis specifically, but all of my trials are global. So they are done in North America, in Europe, in China, in Australia, in Asia, like we have countries all over. All of that falls under me. So I've designed a protocol with my team for this trial. And then we run it, the way we run it, we're not the operations team, but we're running it in the sense of oversight, like the safety stuff that comes in, we watch it and monitor it. We discuss with any physicians that are anywhere in the world if something happens to a patient or if they have a question. That's kind of the running part of it. Now, the phase that I'm in the filing phase. We've completed a bunch of trials, so we're aggregating, analyzing the data. We have statisticians for that, but the interpretation part, we're writing the documents that go into the filing. All of that falls under me. So I have to oversee all of that. So a regional person in China will not have that level of ownership, right? They will take what I write and they may translate it and they may ask me for my input. So that's how kind of the role varies. There's more responsibility associated with it. And it depends what you like. Do you want to be only in this aspect of the role, or do you want to have a more holistic control on the matter? Like, where do you want to lie? And yes, we have a lot of meetings, but like we also have to review a lot of documents that we've written. We have to write a lot of documents. In the filing process, we get a lot of questions, which are very scientific questions. We have to read, understand, interpret our data. So it's not for nothing. It's not like I have, a fetish for meetings. That's why I'm doing this. There is that analytical part of it that really speaks to me and may speak to people, and that is the part that is interesting. So yeah. And
I guess in between those meetings, you're also a teleneurologist at NeuroX. So I wanted to, when I read that, I was like, how, mashallah, she's doing 2 things at the same time. She's doing, pharma as well as, maintaining a connection to patients. So I guess, could you share how that kind of fits into your overarching, career? Why do you keep that patient connection when you already are in pharma? Do you think that's something important that influences your day-to-day at Sanofi? And you also mentioned that it's kind of waned and over time, sometimes you take a hiatus and then you come back to it. So I guess, could you just explain your role as a teleneurologist and why you think that's important to maintain that position as well as, leading a global team at Sanofi? Yeah, so what happened was initially when I transitioned, I continued my clinic, like a physical clinic for a few months, and then I stopped because it was getting to be too much. And the support staff that they were giving me was not enough. And when I was out of the country, they're trying to reach out to me for patient needs and stuff, and that's not sustainable. Then after a few months, I started doing locums on weekends as a neurohospitalist at Bay State Medical Center, actually, for like a couple months. Then I stopped again for COVID hit. I didn't want to do inpatient because this is more of a side gig. The reason I still persisted and kept trying to find different iterations, the final iteration being the teleneurology position, was because I really switched over very quickly.
Like I wasn't attending for like a little less than 2 years, and it was really early in the process, which is not usual to generally. And it's not like I hated the clinical work. I just didn't want to do too much of it, if it makes sense. Like I needed a balance, and that was what I was seeking. I think like if I had been doing clinic or working in a hospital environment for like say 10 years, maybe I would not have felt the same way. So it's not like people should do it. It's up to them entirely. It's a personal choice. Now the way that I'm able to do it now in teleneurology, which is a little bit more stable, I'm actually able to do like 2 to 3 clinics every month. Is that Sanofi actually allows for this. Like they give me X amount of Fridays a month for clinical work. I just have to, inform them, and they know. And they think it's good because what happens is that you have that patient interaction, and when you're designing that trial or you're thinking about that patient workflow, you have that thought in your mind and you're able to translate better. So Sanofi itself has a commitment to this. So that helps. And the other thing that helped was that since due to COVID, there was an uptick in a lot of telemedicine companies. And this was actually a friend of mine that started this, and it's very unique, NeuroX, in the sense that it's actually a clinic, a whole day clinic I do, and my patients are actually in Oklahoma. So I have an Oklahoma license. I've never been there, but I have a license there. So they come to the hospital, and I have a nurse and or a resident, depending on the day of the week, and they see the patient physically, and I dial in afterwards, and I can ask them to do X, Y, Z, and I have access to the online hospital system, and I can prescribe and everything. So that makes it easier because they have a medical assistant, they have a nurse, they have a resident, and it really helps to be able to sustain that. And I think this is the most balanced I've had in terms of balancing my clinical work and my day job.
Awesome. And another question directed towards the physicians and the medical professionals out here. So I guess this is kind of a touchy subject, kind of controversial. I was debating whether or not, but I'll just go for it. So I guess from me looking in, I feel like physicians and medical professionals might see transitioning to pharma as like, quote unquote, like selling out to big pharma, like, I don't know what ethical qualms they may have with transitioning to pharma, like, I don't know, leaving behind your patients or, leaving them, I don't know. But I guess what would you tell people that see it this way? And again, like maybe they haven't thought about pharma before, but perhaps what you say might clear some doubts for them.
No, it's still a valid question. Like usually they say, I went over to the dark side is the typical saying. So, and sell out is the other one. So that's for sure. Like folks say that. I think not as much anymore as they realize how exploitative the hospital systems are. What I work in is drug development research. Like it is really, that initial thought that I had of finding a cure, that's actually what I'm doing now, Because even in my previous company, I did we approve commercial launches. I did do a drug approval for an MS drug. So that is like bringing a new treatment to patients. Of course, you make money in the process. Of course, I make more money in pharma than I made in the hospital system. But for me, it's actually more transparent because the pharmaceutical companies are clear that they're for profit. The hospitals, at least when I was there, I felt like they pretended they were nonprofits while they were leeching off of patients. I mean, there's so much that I found like unethical there. The way that they have residents and fellows on minimum wage, if not less, and that's not fair. We weren't, I did residency a few years ago, we didn't negotiate salaries. I know recently that has changed. It's about time. So I found it a very exploitative system. I felt like they were making money, they were making profits, and they were not actually working in like within the domains that they said they were. The other thing is like that I do some public health nonprofit work that we can speak to later, but in that domain I've done some health policy advocacy work. And I know for a fact that hospitals, for instance, they buy medications from pharma companies at a lower price point, which is fine. This is why those things exist. But those medications are supposed to be for Medicaid and Medicare patients. However, they upsell them. They sell them at that higher price point to patients that have private insurance. So there is no trickle-down effect of the systems that are in place. And so definitely, of course, like pharma companies are also making money and they are part of this healthcare system problem. But I think it would be just gross negligence to ignore that there are so many other facets of the healthcare system that are so broken. The hospitals, the PBMs that do not actually allow the discounts down to the patients either. So I think that if you have a qualm about working in a certain institution, it would be very hard to even work in a hospital as far as I'm concerned. So that was why, and again, like I said, I work more on the research side, so I may also be a little bit far away from, the pricing and all that stuff.
I think that's a perfect transition to our next question, which is about your advocacy work. Like I mentioned in the beginning, you're the president of the American Muslim Health Professionals, which is an advocacy group. I wanted to ask, if you could tell the audience a little bit more about what you guys do. Perhaps we could have some new members join tonight.
Yes.
And yeah, just share with the audience a little bit more about your organization.
Yeah, so I did do a master's in public health and I wanted to utilize it in some way. I did utilize it in research, just to be clear, because I did a lot of epi, biostats, clinical trial design coursework when I was doing my master's. So that was all relevant to my current job. But I thought that maybe I should do a little bit more in public health. Admittedly, public health, like working in public health, I think is pretty thankless, and I didn't think I could do that. Volunteering takes the edge off, because then you don't really care, right? Because you're doing it because you want to. So that was the path I chose. I joined American Muslim Health Professionals. It is an organization that basically empowers Muslim health professionals, any health professional, not physicians, ancillary public health professionals, dentists, therapists, whatever, to actually improve healthcare for everybody, because there is no Muslim healthcare, right? If you improve healthcare, you do it for everybody. How we do that is through three arms. One is health policy and advocacy that I alluded to. The other thing is mental health work. And then also we do professional development activities, which includes mental health first aid training. It includes advocacy training targeted towards health professionals, so they feel they know how to engage with legislators and talk about issues that are important in our healthcare infrastructure. And we've done a conference as well. We did one conference at MIT a couple of years ago. It was our first one. And then we did one at Harvard School of Public Health, and then last year we did one at Johns Hopkins. We're figuring out where we're gonna go next year. We're more volunteer run, so we can't do it every year. So those are kind of the different aspects, and currently I'm the president. I started off as their health policy and advocacy person. One example of what we did, for instance, during COVID, we were one of the founding organizations that created the National Muslim COVID Task Force. So that was a big collaboration with over 40 Muslim organizations. And who said Muslims can't work together? I mean, there was a lot of drama, but I will say this, that we were better organized than the US government. So we had, I kid you not, we had the imams at the same table, we had the health professionals, the public health people, the medical people, we had the community organizations like ISNA and ICNA, and we all worked together. I ran the policy committee for this organization. Worked closely with Engage, with MPAC, with Polygon, different advocacy organizations. We brought the healthcare element of it. I'm not a lobbyist. I just find it interesting. I don't even have that much advocacy experience, so I will say that these guys, I really learned from the other organizations. We wrote letters to legislators, we showed up at meetings, we held meetings with legislators, we issued action alerts. I wrote many articles that year. I think I wasn't traveling, so I have too much time on my hand. So we wrote a book chapter describing what we did as well. So those resources are available. This is all volunteer, by the way. So that's kind of how I thought that I could make a bigger difference. This event is kind of part of that as well, right? And I've done a few events in the Boston area, two of them at Harvard actually. So on different career paths and whatnot, and health equity as well. So yes, and we do some. I also publish every now and then when I have time. But again, this is just a side gig, so it's not consistent. I am also, because I got involved in this, I'm also a John Templeton Fellow for Interfaith America, where we're doing public health and spirituality research. I'm just an advisor. There are other people doing the actual research. And then I am also the steering committee chair for Rare Disease Diversity Coalition, which helps improve diversity, especially for rare disease clinical trials. So in collaboration with them, we even developed a health equity curriculum that we're working on publishing. It's for clinical care. So like those types of things that I got involved in, and I really think it's just because I find those things interesting. So there's a lot of ways that you can make a difference. You just have to find the iteration that works for you. And definitely after this, like if people are interested, we have WhatsApp groups and whatnot. I will say that there's also, and this audience might find that interesting, recently I am starting another group for Muslim pharmaceutical professionals specifically. So it's called the Muslim Biopharma Collaborative. So that is something that we just started like a couple months ago. It started during Ramadan. People I know started it, but now we're creating a board and whatnot, and because I've done some board work, they have involved me as well. So if you guys want to join that as well, you're welcome to. You can meet more professionals there in the pharmaceutical space and learn about the diversity of departments and experiences that come with it.
Awesome. Jazakumullah khair. That sounds like you guys do a lot of meaningful work and represent us, not just among Muslim circles, but on a bigger stage. So yeah, I think we should definitely, maybe we can, afterwards, I can share in our social channels here at MIT for maybe students or medical students that might want to get involved as well, inshallah. Going back to the pharma industry, you're also, I guess these questions are related to your leadership. So you're obviously, you mentioned you have a bunch of, what's the right word? Medical director. I was gonna say minions, but I don't think that's the right word. So I guess clinical trials do fail and drugs don't get approved, and maybe you waste a few months or years researching something that ends up not panning out. So I guess what advice do you guys? What advice did you learn over these years in pharma on how to bounce back and kind of rise out of the ashes and start all over again and stay consistent in the face of failure in the pharma industry?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I really think you've done your research. So just to be clear, my pharma experience in reality, like a full-time pharma position, is 7 years. So I can't say that I have seen that much in terms of trial failures and whatnot. My first job was to work on an approval of a drug that was coming back. Like they were on the market, then they were taken off of the market, and then they were making a comeback because they had additional data. So technically their trials were successful already. So, and then even then there's a chance that you don't get approved, of course, but we were successful in getting approved. Now, the last about 5 years or so that I've been at Sanofi, I was running new trials where it was a 50-50, right? We could fail, we could succeed. The phase 3 trials I have, there were 4 in number. 3 of them are done. So I can, because this is published, you can read these articles. articles. It's in the New England Journal of Medicine, so you can read what we published. So 2 of them did not meet their primary endpoint, so it goes to your question. So, and 1 of them did. Now, what I told my team, because I have the minions that you speak of, the medical directors, I have a few of them. And some of them had failed trials and some of them had the successful one, right? So for us, the point is not to get an approval, not to get that positive clinical trial. For us, the purpose is to answer the scientific question. And if we answer that question, even if it is a negative answer, we have been successful. So it's how you define success. The trial success or failure, it's not like we're fubbing the numbers so we get the right answer here. The right answer being the commercially viable one. That's not how this works. What the point is that we have to answer the scientific question. And that scientific question will have an efficacy element, yes, no. It will have a safety element, good, bad. So you just have to get to that point. I will say, and again, this is public information, so it's not, you caught me at the right time, because like a year ago, this would have been impossible. We were also on partial clinical hold for a liver signal. So what the FDA said, they told us to, adjust our recruitment. It was partial, it wasn't a complete hold. We were still continuing the trial, but we had to adjust kind of the way we were doing it, stop recruitment on some of the trials and whatnot, so it's a bit complex. But even that, difficult as it was, and of course I had to do a lot of analyses to further understand the liver signal, so it was long hours, but that was still a positive thing because we discovered a safety signal in the trial. That was the purpose. So sure, it caused chaos, sure, it caused panic, and it definitely led to complicated conversations. And by the way, we were able to modify that hold, so all good in the end. But yeah, and right now we're working on the approval based off of 1 of the trials. So let's see what happens, because like I said, even if we have positive data, it's still it's a balance of benefit and risk. So it still can go either way. We just have to present that data in the best possible way and then see what happens.
Awesome. I think we're right at the 15 minutes left for Q&A, but I did want to sneak in a question. I think it wouldn't be a MIT hosted, computer science moderated fireside chat without me asking an AI question. So yeah, here goes. So how do you see AI and ML kind of influencing pharma moving forward? I know there's a lot of exciting things coming out of Google DeepMind with AlphaFold, predicting protein structures, and there's obviously medicine discovery, drug discovery algorithms being developed. What excites you as to the next 10 years of pharma?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I will tell you how AI is being incorporated right now, simplistically speaking. Some of what you said, but there's other smaller sort of introductions as well. We're automating some of the processes related to, writing protocols or narratives, as we call them, and whatnot, and making it more generated through AI. So those are the simple ways that it's become a part of our day-to-day. Now, what you said, now the interesting thing is that I have done a lot of work with our AI folks. I even had a computational biologist from Harvard working with me, a student, over the summer, and she did a lot of code work for us, and she was spectacular. So she worked closely with the digital team, but she was working with me. So the way that I see it working, one is what you described, prediction of protein structures and how, the target disease interaction with the medication works. So that is definitely already there in the earlier phases of development, and it's being I think Sanofi might have also acquired a company or 2 in that. You'll have to Google it, so don't quote me, I may be wrong, but I remember a lot of announcements in that area that there's definitely a lot of interest. That does live a little bit in the earlier space than what I work in, but that will be interesting. It may improve early development. I'm not speaking specifically about Sanofi, but just in general. It may improve early development pipeline, for instance, and sustainability of it in some ways if it's actually actually works, you know? The other thing is that within the drug discovery space, even a little bit later, like they are doing a lot of work to, you know, create knowledge graphs and literature and like incorporate safety events to like put all of this together to kind of develop your strategy. So there is some work being done in this space and by different companies in different ways. But it's still a little earlier. But I think where it's at is that you could use this as an ancillary source of data to drive your conversations forward. That's where I think it is right now. Like you get all this information from different outlets, and then you can have more intelligent conversations to develop strategy in general. So I think that is interesting. I think some of it is like, for instance, the person I brought in, it's been very, like even simple things like developing a document and developing the right code to say that translate like the work that they do in 1 week into like, you know, a matter of hours. I think those are simple wins that probably not 10 years from now that are more immediate. But I think 10 years from now, I think strategy can be better informed if we use multiple data sets. And I mean, it remains to be seen, but just hypothetically speaking, I think that would maybe improve success in the long run, but let's see.
Okay, awesome. Jazakumullah khair. That concludes my questions. So now I want to open up the floor to you guys. If the audience has any burning questions, we have like 10 minutes. So yeah, you guys go ahead. You can raise your hands. I can call on you. So any questions? Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much again for this really insightful talk. I'm really curious about your experience in telehealth and how you see it evolving as a field of its own over the years. Do you think demand is going to grow in the future? How do you foresee it changing?
So the question is on telehealth and how it may impact the future of healthcare in general, and if it's going to evolve further. I think it will. I will say, like during COVID, there was an uptick, and then there was an attempt to actually, reverse it, because insurance companies didn't want to pay or reimburse for televisits and whatnot. But there was a lot of like advocacy work to prevent that from happening, and I think it did work because telehealth is really here to stay. And I do think that in some fields there is really a lot of room for this, and there are some regions of the US that really need it. So I do think it has already evolved. And some ways that it's evolved is that, like for instance, like what I'm doing, similar to that, like there are people that do inpatient work, especially in stroke, where a lot of hospitals in certain regions like Oklahoma and Montana and whatnot do not have specialists on site. So they call a person who is a neurologist sitting somewhere else, and they explain what to do next and they advise on that. So that has actually been going on for quite a while, because stroke is a huge problem and a lot of hospitals have this need. So I do think that it definitely is here to stay. I think it is evolving, and some of the ways it is also evolving is kind of turning into global health, where specialists sitting in these countries, in the US and whatnot, are also seeing patients in other countries where they need it, whether it's more just for, volunteer work or whether it's for actual pay. It varies.
Anyone else? Yep.
Do you think this like cross-state licensing problems for telehealth will be simplified, or is there a friction from like licensing boards in each state?
So some of it has already been simplified. Like I think that I never did this, but there are some states that have collaborative licensing now. and the telehealth license that I got was extremely quick. It's nothing like a normal license, which takes months. I mean, between Massachusetts and New York, the two places where I had a full license, it was a nightmare. But I had a Florida telehealth license as well, and it's just like a click of a button, really, and I was very impressed. So it's not that hard to get the licenses, and then because of the needs from COVID, there are some states that have created collaborative licensing. I think it should improve more, but that's where we are right now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Syed, for your time today. I noticed that you wear a lot of hats, just among your full-time role in the pharmaceutical industry, practicing medicine, but also leading different Muslim social groups, professional groups, and also your work in public health advocacy and volunteering. I'm just now myself starting to try to involve myself in volunteer work, especially in the domain of Muslim youth programming. Apart from school and work, and I find that it's incredibly difficult just because of the time constraints. And so my question is, how are you able to wear so many hats and really dedicate yourself to all of these different things without necessarily compromising in any of these categories?
No, that's a great question. I think one of the things is that I deliberately avoided work that required too much in-person presence. Like, I have in-person presence, but it's a little bit more controlled. Like, if I have to go somewhere every week to volunteer in person, it probably won't work, because I don't know whether I will be here next week, or I'll be in a different state or country, or like I'm just busy that weekend because I have other social or work engagements, you know? So I think the idea is that you need to find something that you actually find easy to do. I think it's easier for me to think, and it's easier for me to write and talk about these topics. I don't need to prepare, right? Like, it's not like I was sitting last night writing a speech for today, right? It's just talking with Tarek here. He did most of the work anyways. So I find that a little bit easier. So I think that's what I would say. And it's finding something, if you like something enough, it's quicker to do it as well. So you have to do that rather than, I don't think that I am the sort of person that could have done, like, you know, I go to a soup kitchen every week. I went once, like, I don't know, maybe 2-3 years ago because a friend was going, but that's about it. But I'm not gonna be able to do that consistently, you know, it's not possible. So I think that was my way of thinking where I want to volunteer and what I want to do. And it's the people, the other people in that group. You actually do have to like them to some extent, you know? I think that's important because then, yeah, otherwise it won't work either.
I did want to squeeze in one of the questions that I got on my phone before the fire chat began. It's related to your work as a neurologist. So they wanted to specifically know, kind of, in addition to your path to becoming a neurologist, also why you chose becoming a neurologist versus like neurosurgeon or psychiatrist or one of the related fields.
Yeah, so yeah, good question, I guess. The thing is that the reason, first I narrowed it down to neuroscience. That is really how I did it. Neuro something is where I started. Why? It was because I realized that there were the most unanswered questions are in neuroscience. So I decided that, going back to my initial why of curing something, right? Like, I figured that if I want to do something that makes a difference, I have to go into an area where there are more questions than answers. So that was how I went into neuro. Then I looked at neurology, neurosurgery. I did several months of neurosurgery rotations. I came to the US during med school and I did like 4 or 5 months. in upstate New York, of all the places, because there was a neurosurgeon that I knew over there. I realized I did not I mean, I liked it, but there's something that neurosurgeon told me actually. He said in order to decide what you want to do, you have to love the most boring part of that job. And I have to say, I did not enjoy all those spine surgeries upon spine surgeries and hammering into spines. And it was like, it's nice, it's interesting. I didn't hate it, but I just couldn't see myself waking up like at 4 or 5 in the morning and spending all day in an OR. And I have very good friends that are surgeons and they love it. And I understand where their passion comes from, but that was not me. I didn't, like after a few months, I was already feeling overwhelmed by the stench of the OR, you know, because it has a stench. So I ruled it out. I love I drilled a hole in the brain and, you know, I did a lot of cool stuff. I enjoyed it. I saw many interesting brain surgeries, like whatnot. It was great. But I just could not do it consistently. I thought I could admire it from a distance. Neuroradiology was another thing. It's just sitting in a dark room all day. I think I wasn't built for that. I think I would get depressed. So I didn't like that. And I do enjoy some patient contact. Then psychiatry, I don't have the emotional fortitude for that. I don't think I like listening to people's problems. So that I just could not. I did at one point think about forensic psychiatry, but then I realized I would actually have to do normal psychiatry first. So I was like, no way. So I just could not. I like neurology because you could disconnect from the patient after a while and you're like, you know, focusing on an element of their disease and there's more pathways involved. I mean, psychiatry is great, don't get me wrong. But it wasn't for me. I can't do that. So yeah, that was my ruling out kind of journey. Just to be clear, disclaimer, there's nothing wrong with any of those fields if you're in them or want to go into them.
Awesome. So yeah, that concludes the Fireside Chat. Dr. Syed, thank you so much for joining us. Inshallah, this is the first of many meetings and conversations that we'll have between the MSA and you. So yeah, thank you. Thank you guys for showing up.
Thank you.